are a very, very holy grail of the property market, and that is probably the ultimate bit of information that investors really require. And at the moment, Dubai is leading the way through RERA in releasing information on the markets, but across the region, there is far less transparency in this information, and some deals are categorically off-market, they're private, and people really don't want you to know the yield information. But equally, you will find there's now a body of expertise, and again, Dubai is leading this trust with professional organisations, RSCS valuations, where you really have to, if you are providing a valuation report, you will have to have found some comparables. You will have to check them up through your own office information, whether you can disclose that or not. So we're beginning to see the emergence of some data on property transactions which is giving you accurate yield information. And again, some of that is coming into the press, so it's coming.
I think the difference between the markets that we're in and the more mature markets in, say, Western Europe, is that the data, a lot of the data is known about, but it's not publicly available quite as easily as it is in Western markets. And I think that will develop as the market becomes more and more sophisticated. In the meantime, it is firms like my own firm and others that you could say that we do well in a non-transparent market because the role of the expert advisor is more important. However, I certainly would much rather have a smaller piece of a much bigger cake than a large part of a small cake. So, and those of you who are at the presentation I gave on transparency earlier today will have heard that the more transparent the market becomes, the larger that market will become as a property investment market. So it does make sense for data to be more readily available than it is at the moment. But there isn't an overnight solution, it's a gradual process.
I'd like to add, just to add on that, I mean, obviously from an investment banking perspective, clearly we would like to see a greater transparency around the yields that take place in properties, but it also is driven by the sheer volume of transactions in properties. And market chatter generally predicates, where people think the yields are going to come out, provided there are enough data points or transactions taking place. And which is why I'm talking purely from the commercial side of things. So I think the residential market is pretty well known, but from the commercial side of things, you're just not seeing the volume of trades where anybody would want to reveal why they sold a property for a certain. And I probably won't tell you much. You'll need to know the why, and the why in an emerging market is generally not as simple as, well, I was a pension fund and I typically bench myself off 4.5% yield returns and I got 6.25%, so I was pretty thrilled. That doesn't happen here. And to your point about transparency against a larger market, it is a bit of a chicken and egg sort of thing. So you do need sort of larger commercial champions to come out and sort of reveal this data, but they will only do that if there's an interest in doing it, and the interest in doing it is the source of capital and investment. And if there isn't a need to source international capital or even local sustainable capital, then why would I give that information away for free? So as much as it's desirable and absolutely fully endorse that, I think it's a great thing to have. In an emerging market and in a market like Dubai that is starting to sort of really accelerate its emergence, I don't really think that giving a yield on the sale of a DIFC office is going to tell you much about whether an office property generally in Dubai should be benched off that yield or not, because you won't know the why.
It's a very good point that with limited data it's easy to oversimplify and draw the wrong conclusion. We've got time for one more question, then we need to draw things to a close.
Alan, can I actually relay a question that was asked to me by several delegates earlier today? And that was actually after the presentation on IPS and obviously how it's become adopted in these markets. It's actually for Ken Crichton. And the question that many people were asking me is, so I bought a particular property and on my title deeds it reports a built-up area of X. So if there's this potential 24% variance, well, what happens to my title deed post-implementation of IPS? So maybe Ken, could you just explain how that's going to work moving forward?
Thank you. It's a good question that has come up quite often, how you implement a new standard like this. I think the recommended approach, and the approach that I can give from the experience we had with IFRS, is dual reporting, at least initially. So, and I spoke with a few people earlier today about this example. An example I worked on with IFRS in 2010 was with Mexico. And that summer, the Securities and Exchange Commission in Mexico adopted IFRS. Now, all the companies in Mexico had been reporting under Mexican GAAP for many, many years. And how do you deal with the transition? It's the same exact point that Rob is making. And so they reported two numbers. So initially, in that first year, Mexican companies listed on the stock exchange reported their financial information based on IFRS and Mexican GAAP. And there were two different numbers. Now what we found in the second year is that the Mexican GAAP number disappeared pretty quickly. It went out of style. And I think with property measurement, it's even easier than it is with financial reporting. With intangible concepts like finance, how you report numbers can actually change the number. But when you're talking about the physical size of a building, no matter how you measure the space that we are in right now, the space doesn't change. So you could report initially that a property is 1,000 square meters on IPMS and 1,100 square meters on an RICS standard or a BOMA standard. And people will understand that the building is not changing size. So that's the recommended approach. And we certainly don't recommend that a huge project take place that we retrospective measure property. I don't think that's really necessary. But that's the recommendation.
Thanks very much, Ken. Any further questions? Time for one more before we wind up. There's one at the side.
Good afternoon, Raj Alawalia, Alda Properties, Asset Management. Just an interesting one that I thought would be good to add to the
Sorry, so
discussion.
can I ask you to speak up a little? Sure.
I wanted to focus on environmental sustainability, and in Abu Dhabi we're focusing more on sustainability in the long term. Obviously the government's implemented Estidama, and we're looking more at the operational costs of some of our developments and the life cycle costs of the assets that we manage. So I'm just interested in opening up to the panel, is environmental sustainability also an important factor to attract more real estate investment?
Who would like to go first on that? There'll be a few views from the panel. Elaine?
I think the environmental impact and sustainability is so talked about these days that we almost consciously thought, well, we won't do it today because everybody's doing it all the time. Because we know here locally, with Masdar and with the Dubai municipality regulations that came into force in March, that became law in March, that our levels of sustainability, environmental and green is actually being taken extremely seriously here. So I think it's a given. We know that we have to all behave. It's a fact now.
Thanks, Elaine. Chris?
Thanks, Elaine. I think the point around is it important in investment context? I think increasingly so, and it's certainly something that international investors look for. It gives long-term sustainability in an economic sense. I think that Abu Dhabi's Estidama is actually a great measure, a great rating system. Actually, probably works better than LEED, but because like the rest of the world has got its fixation on LEED, we do have to make those comparisons to it. I think that one of the key parts of Estidama that you just picked up is around the life cycle costing, and I think that opens up a big, another big subject for this region in terms of looking more sensibly about how much, in an economic sense, we're going to be spending over the life of the building, and actually how much that impacts the environment. I think, yet again, the more frequent the replacements of assets in a building, it costs more, it harms the environment more. Both of those things cannot be good, and I think that's certainly one of the things that the Estidama plays to.
David, you've just completed the development of an office building in Abu Dhabi, which, if I remember rightly, has a good LEED Estidama rating. has it been worth the expenditure for you, and has it made the building more lettable?
The short answer to that is undoubtedly yes, in terms of being more marketable to occupiers, and going forwards, I would hope yes, also more marketable and more valuable in the investment market. We took a decision when we started our office development, International Tower in Abu Dhabi, to set out on the path of achieving LEED, US Green Building Council LEED Gold rating. And I can happily share with you there were various times through the development cycle where we looked very carefully at whether the additional expenditure was something we should continue with or not. I'm pleased to say we managed to persuade the fund to continue with it, and about a month ago, after 5 years worth of submissions, etc., we are actually the first commercial office building in Abu Dhabi to secure a LEED Gold rating. So through the lease up, yes, a number of global multinationals have asked the question. It's on the checklist now for major occupiers. Undoubtedly on the checklist also for institutional investors. I think it's quite interesting that we have spent the last hour or so with the word sustainability on the screen, but without actually talking about what almost the layman's interpretation of sustainability is. I think sustainability could have been a casualty of the downturn in the marketplace. I'm very pleased to say that I haven't seen that at all. And I would personally continue to support introducing the right way of developing, both in terms of the construction phase, but also the operational phase, which I think is equally important, as a means by which not only to protect and preserve the assets that we have, but it actually does deliver the right things in terms of bottom line to both occupier and also investor.
Thanks very much, David. We're certainly, as a firm, we're convinced that as well as being the right thing to do environmentally, it's the right thing to do in business terms. And there's increasing evidence from Western European markets particularly that investment in sustainability will future-proof a building, and there will be a continual divergence in valuations and relatability between buildings which are environmentally sound and those which are less so. And there is now statistical evidence to show that, and we have lots of anecdotal evidence of corporate clients of ours who have a strong preference for buildings which score highly in whichever one of the accreditation systems which is followed. Any of the panel like to add anything to that? Well, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank you, the audience, very much indeed for staying with us until the end of this panel session, and I hope it was useful for you. And I'd also like to thank all of the panel members for their contributions. Thank you very much indeed.
I think just to reiterate what Alan says, I mean, my sincere thanks to all the panel members here. It's been an interesting session. It's interesting that